Aloha, everyone. My name is Anderson Leanne, the Artistic Director for the Hawaii International Film Festival. And thank you for joining us on this special panel discussion on the film Cousins. Basically, the theme of this, the topic of this discussion for this panel is I'm using seeing Cousins as a kind of a case study from adapting it from from book to screen. The book, the novel, the original text was written by Patricia Grace, and talking about the journey of adapting that to screen. We've invited special guests here to have this conversation about seeing Cousins and using that as a case study, but maybe the inspirations and also kind of connective tissues with the own works of the various panelists here. And this is part of the Indigenous Lens showcase powered by Pacific Islanders in Communication. This is kind of a series of mini festivals that we're having in the spring season, virtual festivals, as we pivot during this kind of like, hopefully the sunsetting of this lockdown and pandemic. Again, yes, like crossing fingers. And before we start, I'd like to introduce Leanne Ferrara, the Executive Director of Pacific Islanders in Communication, to say a few words. Leanne?
Thank you, Anderson, and thank you everyone for being on the panel. Pacific Islanders in Communications is very excited to be hosting or sponsoring Indigenous Lens during the HIF Showcase this spring. And we're really looking forward to having a great, robust discussion on this panel. And we just want to tell everyone to go out and see all our Pacific films, that we're very proud of all of them. And we would really love to just get out the word out there. So please share with everyone to join the showcase, HIF Showcase this spring or in a few days, and to watch all of the Pacific films out there. But thank you. Aloha.
Thank you, Leanne. And I'd like to introduce the panelists in this panel. And these are well-noted filmmakers, HIF alumni, I like to call them. We've shown many of their films at past HIF editions, and also as part of Indigenous Lens, they're all official selections of Indigenous Lens too. So I would like to, of course, the guest of honor is Briar Grace Smith, the co-director, screenwriter, and one of the main actors for Cousins. Thank you for joining us and allowing us to pick your brain and whatnot. Thank you, Briar. We have, as part of the Kanaka Maoli New Wave, there's a shorts program that we have as part of the Indigenous Lens, bringing back kind of like these great short films that have played, and award-winning short films that have played at past HIF editions. We have Erin Lau, director of The Moon and the Night. Hi, Erin. And we have Justyn Chong, director of Down on the Sidewalk in Waikiki. How's it going?
Aloha.
Aloha. And also we have Vilsoni Hereniko, who also, we are bringing back his historic film and landmark from The Land Has Eyes, which was an official selection of Sundance, and we showed it at one of the, and then right after at a HIF Spring Showcase, right after the Sundance Festival, I think in 2002. Vili is not only a well-noted filmmaker and poet and writer, but also and playwright, but also a professor at the University of Hawaii. He's also with the Academy for Creative Media. And Vili, thank you for joining us as well.
Yeah, kia ora.
So, I mean, so I think we're gonna just hit the ground running. I don't know, Vili, I empower you to kind of lead the discussion, so to speak. But I think this is really great to talk about kind of Cousins and the journey of Cousins, because the Patricia Grace novel, not only Patricia Grace is an icon and a landmark author in Aotearoa, as the first published Maori female author, and also with Cousins being such a well-beloved novel, almost, and maybe starting from that, Briar, talking about kind of the process, the journey, the inspiration of adapting this the novel into a film.
So Cousins, I first came into contact with Cousins perhaps when it was published in 1992. So I went to so this is a very genesis for me, the meeting of me and the book. And it was at the book launch, and Patricia was my mother-in-law, and we held it at Takupuahia Marae, which is one of her marae in Titahi Bay. And there were many people at this book launch, and I had a newborn child, and the book was passed around the circle of people and held and pressed, and so was my newborn baby. The newborn baby went out of the marae, out of the meeting house, and ended up in the kitchen with the cooks. I found him later, but the book came back into my hands perhaps 24 years later. But between that time, Merata Mita, who you will all know or have heard of, and I know is a mentor to many filmmakers in Hawaii, she had tried to adapt the book over a period of about 20 years, and it hadn't been successful. And that was a sign of the times, because you know, the idea of a Maori woman writer director wasn't something that was embraced. And so by the time it came into my hands, in the hands of Ainsley Gardner, who's the producer and co-director, the world was, the powers that be were a bit more woke to that idea. And we had also, over the years of the adaptation, between us, we had made several short films as directors. So we decided in the end to put up our hands to direct it as well. But yeah, so I was I had the task of writing it, but I hadn't looked at any of the adaptations previously, because I wanted to go into it with a kind of a fresh take.
Oh, so there were other adaptations of Cousins as well, right? In various
Yeah, I think
films.
Meredith had, yeah, she had written several drafts.
Several drafts. Okay,
Yes,
got it. Understood.
Here. And Gayling Preston had worked, after Merata had worked, who's a Pākehā filmmaker here, had worked with Patricia Grace to also do an adaptation. So there were other drafts floating around.
Right. So did you, I mean, how involved was Patricia to your adaptation?
So she went and she wrote with fresh eyes her version of the book adaptation. So when I say I didn't read any adaptations, I did read that, and I took several scenes, as that's kind of where I started. Like, I had my own impression. I read the book about 3 times. I already knew that in its previous lives, the writers had struggled with, because there's so much material in the book, of what to keep and what to lose. So I knew I had to be really brutal and really cut to the chase. And I just drew on the points and the characters that really resonated with me. And with that, I also had Patricia's draft. And so from her draft and what I wanted to do with the book, I started to build that very first draft. And Patricia came in as, I guess, my first reader and a script consultant. And she was really amazing to work with. But there came a time, I think it might have been draft 2, where I felt I really have to, I knew what it was. I really had to go away and work by myself for a time. Yeah, so she worked quite closely with me though throughout.
And for people who have, I mean, I assume, people who are watching this panel discussion, they've seen the film already. And, I mean, I personally haven't read the book, but I'm from our previous conversations, Briar, that the book is very, like you said earlier, the book is very dense, right? And, the film itself, I like to say it's, I like it very much. I love economic storytelling, and the fact that there's you're capturing kind of, it's very dreamlike, and there's a kind of capturing the essence of the characters, and kind of characterizations of them, of the trifecta of the main trifecta in the film. But can you how do you kind of, when you're adapting, how do you, as a fan obviously of the book, how do you let go of things that are not being too precious, so to speak, you know, and you know, kind of like, I mean, you're straddling the fence of like, and you know, it's the fact that, you know, you're working with the author and like, you know, like this is her work, you know, and how do you kind of straddle that fence of like, you know, making sure that, you know, I mean, not to say there's a checks and balances, but like making sure that you're honoring the work at the same time, making a new interpretation of it and making it your own.
Yeah. So as I said, there did have to come a time when I stopped working with Patricia
Mm.
because she was holding on to things I understood that were resonated with her, and I had things that resonated with me. And at some point, you have to, you know, be quite strong and step away. And I guess in my first drafts, there were things that were extraneous that I wouldn't let go. But what I do, and I do it with all scripts, is that there comes a time when I'm ready to let go, and I know that they're holding back the story. And with this particular story, one of the challenges, oh my goodness, you know, with any feature film, it's about keeping momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And so the tricky thing about this film is that it takes place over 3 time periods,
Mm-hmm.
and there are so many characters, and it was holding momentum of the whole, but at the same time you're dipping in and out. So structuring it was, so you might be in the present, but you don't want to go back into the past and suddenly go, ooh, you know. So it was all, for me, it was always, how do I keep the momentum building with all of these stops and starts?
Right.
There's something I want to say about the structure too. The structure of the book, I'd say, is very Maori. It's there's a kind of indigenous storytelling that it has, and that it does jump in and out of character and in and out of different time periods. And when I first read it, I started thinking of whaikorero, of oratory, and the way when the speaker, he stands up and he has a point that he has to make. You know, it's so big in our culture, and he has this point, but to make that point, he'll go right back to the gods. You know, he'll go right back to the waka. He'll go, and then he'll be present again, and then he'll jump somewhere else, but always coming back to this point that he wants to make. So and the book is written in that way too. So it was really important to me to hold on to that way of storytelling, that non-linear way of storytelling. And we were challenged on that quite a lot, and both during the script writing and in the edit, when the edit was viewed. People are very used to linear storytelling.
Mm.
They're just used to it. And so when they see something different, I think their natural inclination is to go, why don't you make it linear? It'll be better. But it would have never worked as a linear film. It was in its bones, it was jumping out all over the place.
So, I mean, it's, in a way, did you capture, I mean, in very much you're capturing the cadence of the, you know, the story structure in the film, and that kind of retains that sense, right? So, oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, because it doesn't, definitely, like I said, like in the Q&A, there's tributaries when the different, like, you know, almost like there are characters floating through these currents, and they're kind of feeding this main river, you know. So I thought that was very resonant. It definitely resonated with me. Just you know, talking about, like, I mean, just the process itself. I mean, you were like, you know, I mean, you previously told in the Q&A that it was a 4-year process of writing the screenplay,
4
right?
years.
Yeah, 4 years. And like, I mean, aside from obviously, you know, working originally with Patricia, the author, and then like kind of like letting go, and like, you know, letting her, you know, she's letting go, and you're kind of taking it on your own. What was some of the other challenge? I mean, we're not talking about, like, you know, raising money or anything like that. Let's just talk about just the creative process, you know, like, it's like, I mean, was that, I'm sure there was other factors involved, but just talking about kind of getting the script right for you, like, okay, we're ready to go. So, I mean, what were some of the, I mean, aside from the challenges of, you know, kind of like letting go of things, making it more, capturing the essence of different aspects of the story. What were other challenges that you had to face?
I guess, we talked earlier about the three. It was just something, a question. I had a lot of questions in my head about, because you're writing a script and you have this document on page, and then, but your mind also, when you know you're going to direct it, is jumping ahead to the actual physical life. And so, there were characters around, there were challenges around the characters, and great challenges is like, how would this character be at this age? And what is her relationship with her cousins at this age? How would she be at this age? And what permission what permission do I have to really change them up? And I think you said, Anderson, earlier, that we are very different at various stages of our lives. So there's the child us, and then the teenage us, and then the adult us, and the older person. So I guess it was keeping those versions of characters in my head as I wrote. It was something I was very aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe, and you're going back to basically kind of like, I mean, were there resistance when people are reading their various drafts of like, oh, it should be more linear, like it's like, and maybe Vili can maybe comment about that, because there is a sense of reckoning, not only especially in academia and, basically in like, kind of literature, for example, like of like, the honoring of like, basically it's this Eurocentric view of literature and how stories are told, right? And, like, it's like, and, I mean, you're commenting on kind of like, I don't know, I'm just saying this maybe simplistically, the stream of consciousness kind of storytelling, that is not kind of like held down by kind of like the usual kind of tropes of structure, sort of quote unquote structure, right? That we are known to, that we read in textbooks and in our schooling and whatnot. So Vili, I mean, maybe if you wanted to, comment on kind of like this kind of movement away from, or kind of this Eurocentric point of view of telling stories.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to congratulate Briar. And also, I think as a screenwriter, I'm just blown away by your ability to tell a story using a structure that I compare to the spiral, to like the tree fern, where, you move forward and then you move backward to move forward. And then you move forward and you move backward to move forward. I've never seen a feature film use that structure so effectively. And in fact, I myself am afraid to use a structure like that, because everything that seems to succeed, even works made by indigenous people that have made it into almost like the mainstream. And I'm thinking here of Once Were Warriors. I'm thinking of Whale Rider. Then there's also Nights in the Garden of Spain by Witi Imars. At least 3 novels I'm aware of where the linear structure, like the 3-act structure, at least in Once Were Warriors and Whale Rider, and bearing in mind you're coming, at the tail end of these works that had preceded what you were doing. And for you as a screenwriter to be fearless in saying, no, I'm going to use a different structure and not to be afraid that it could just fall flat on your face, is just truly, truly extraordinary to me as a screenwriter. And so I really want to congratulate you that. And I think what you have done here, and of course it's drawing from Patricia Grace's novel and the structure that's there, to me, she's probably the finest, of all Pacific writers. If I were to be marooned somewhere, I want to take with me Potiki, which is my favorite novel. But it seems to me that indigenous films, the thing that's holding us back is a fear that if we do not use the 3-act structure, Hollywood's proven way of telling stories, which is very linear, we would fail. We would fail. And I suspect that this was why in Once Were Warriors and Whale Rider, there was an effort to mainstream them, make them more commercial. But you have proven that you can still succeed. We can still succeed by drawing from our own oral tradition. So I just want to thank you so much for that. My second viewing of the film was much more rewarding than the first. And I'm sure the third viewing would be even more rewarding, because it's a kind of film that requires you to see it again and again and again, because there is so much in there that I myself can't wait to revisit and learn from. I don't want to take up too much more time, so I just want to stop there.
Yeah, I'm very conscious that we've been fed a diet of film, you know, with that, I guess, a structure we inherited from Hollywood over a century ago. And that was part of the reason that I felt really determined, like we have got our own way of to take that back, our way of storytelling, and reflect, you know, make it's valid. It's just as important. But I'm so glad it worked.
Yes, yes. Thank you. You know, it reminded me that the indigenous film that comes closest to that in my mind is Atarnajuat, The Fast Runner. But I remember watching that film, and there's a period there, like for about 20 to 30 minutes, it was so dense, it was impenetrable.
Yeah.
I got into it, you know, but I found that your screenwriting, it's very layered, but it's clear. If you see it a second time, but don't get it the first, see it again. And it's amazing how you just go forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards, and it's all clean. You can distinguish between, you know, Mata and Makarita and Missy. And I love the way you use the colors of blue and green and red, you know, at the beginning, the opening, and at the end to represent the Tanifa under the water. So it's like, you know, in terms of the journey, when you get to the end, you're at the beginning again, which is very much an indigenous worldview, right?
Yeah.
And I tell you, it's just so thrilling for me to see that. And so thank you.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And you know, I mean, I mean, for Briar, I mean, are there other you know, texts that you are inspired to maybe adapt as well? I mean, the whole, I think cultural fiction is like something that is like, you know, and I use that term, but like, you know, it's you know, there's so much like there's such a strong like library representation of literature and fiction and texts and stories that can be adapted, and different from, you know, different First Nations or First Peoples communities and cultures. Are there any and maybe Erin and Justyn, you can chime in, but and Vili as well, but are there other works that you feel that could be adapted too?
Yeah, I'm sure that I haven't been looking at doing more adaptations, and I lie. Last night I was lying in bed thinking about Portiki. But I'm really drawn to that way of storytelling, and the film. I'm writing a film at the moment. It's you know, one of those films that you dip into every now and again, and you do it. It's very, very slow, been a very slow journey. But it has a kind of a similar structure as well. So I think part of it is conscious, but a lot of it is unconscious. So with this film, I'm not consciously thinking I'm going to do this spiral storytelling. I think that is probably, if we let ourselves, if we're open enough, that's inherently the way that we might naturally tell stories. So I'm sure there'll be more to come, you know, and from many screenwriters.
I mean, we live in this world where, you know, I think of the streamers, right? Like you think of the Netflix and Amazons and whatnot. Like, I mean, you know, I think, you know, at the time when you were adapting Cousins, I mean, the fact that it was so dense, you know, like it's like, did you feel like at the point like this you can't encapsulate everything into one film? You know, like it should be a series or something. Did that cross your mind at all?
You know, one of the people that Galen Preston, who wanted to adapt it after Merita, in her mind it was a 6-part series, so that had already been considered, but we already knew we wanted to do a feature film, and so we were pretty clear. And I have to say, and it's entirely because I knew of the problems other people had adapting it. I was pretty clear about what I wanted to keep after I'd read the book 3 times, and then sat down and I thought what stayed with me. And it was sometimes the things that stayed with me were tiny, and like the marble, there's a marble that features. It's just one little thing in the book, but that somehow became much bigger in the film, and something that it represented, which is about, I'm not sure, about magic and beauty and possibility, became thematic in the film. And that was from that one image and what it inspired in me. So it's amazing, those things that appear tiny, can they have so much more meaning.
Yeah, I'd like to say that that's one of the things that I really appreciated in terms of the visual language, the way you draw attention to little details that have all these connotations, kind of attached to them. As a young boy, marbles, I had a collection of marbles and I used to stare into it,
Yeah, so beautiful.
How on earth that beauty got in there, and how can I unlock it, And then and then there are simple things like the illegal Pakeha guardian, right, who tries to straighten her hair, to comb it, almost as though to domesticate her, right, and bring her into sensibilities. So I just love seeing that kind of imagery that has so much hidden meaning, call it kauna or whatever, connotations attached to it. So it's almost like they're much bigger than the thing itself, the combing, straightening of, domesticating the hair kind of thing, the braiding, the marbles. I mean, and that's one thing that I think is so rare to see in feature films these days. The recognition of little things that means so much more than the action itself. And the other thing that I really liked is the exploration of the space between things and the space between people, the relationships, and the relationship between the seen and the unseen world, between the physical and the spiritual. And to me, that's what Indigenous filmmaking should be about. That's our contribution to world cinema, right? Otherwise, we're just replicating Hollywood's model and what already exists. And so I'm just so grateful that you are challenging all of us who are interested in Indigenous filmmaking, not to be afraid, to look more into our oral ways of telling stories and drawing from that, and not to be afraid of failure. And I think that's one thing that I myself, in the earlier days was afraid of. I don't want to do something that's so different like you've done and have it fall flat on my face because it's not connecting with the rest of the world. So thank you.
I do want to, I am quiet because there's nothing I could express as beautifully as Billy. And I'm coming into this space very much from a Haumana student point of view because I haven't adapted, and I'm in a place where I'm trying to find the courage. And I kind of what's been expressed already is I feel like I'm in a place where I'm trying to ask myself, am I making choices because I've been wired through years of traditional Hollywood films and film school and multiple voices telling me this is how you make a film, or is this coming, or is there something there I need to undo and relearn? But I do want to call attention to, like, this film for me was just very strong evidence of why our stories need to come from in community, because the amount of love, like I was just taken aback by the people, you yourself and the creators, whether from the writers and your the co-direct, your fellow co-director. There was just so evident how much you love your community and your culture and these people on the screen. Like there's so much dignity and so much grace to the way they are treated and brought to life. I get emotional every time I start to think about it, but like it,
Yeah.
and I'm trying right now not to get teary-eyed, but it's like, this is the difference between somebody coming in from the outside and somebody who really truly cares and belongs to this space. There is love here.
Mhm.
And that, I'm really grateful for this film for that, and a reminder why it's important. And as well as an inspiration of to be brave, because as Lily has mentioned before, it's scary because you're like, am I making something that feels just messy, or you're constantly trying to detangle in yourself what is right when you have been told something is incorrect for so long, and trying to walk that journey in yourself to finally find a way of creating where it's truly of who you are, where you come from. And I think this film is so important for all of those reasons.
Mhm.
So I'm truly grateful. And I haven't had the honor of reading Cousins, but I have also read Potiki, and the thing that blew me away was it's been a while since I've read it, but the kauna and the magic and just is all encapsulated. Like, I understand many things are removed, but it still feels like what she creates in her work and Patricia's work. And I think that really blew me away, of that sense of magic and love and kauna and layers that exist in her work is still coming through in your directing. So I'm really just here to gush and be emotional about all this. But yeah, just wanted to say mahalo nui for that.
Could I just pick up on two things, and then I'd love to hear Justyn. Erin, you mentioned the word dignity. I think that's what you've done here, Briar, and your team. You have restored dignity to Indigenous people, to Indigenous worldviews and ways of knowing. You have restored dignity to the Maori people and the way to represent them as complex human beings. It is so rare to see Maori men portrayed with such tenderness. You know, even the man who married Mata, right? And Mata, who has been Christianized and missionized, didn't want to do the business, right? And you know, the way he handled that, I say thank you that he didn't beat her up. You know, there's such dignity there, you know, and even Mrs. Husband, you know, it is so rare to see Polynesian men not beat up their wives, be violent, be into drugs. And that's what you've done. You have restored dignity to us. Really, you have, the men, the women, very complex human beings. And I think the spiral structure allows you to do that, right? To do something that is very profound. When I was watching, I was aware that I was receiving the film in a very different part of my body. It's not in here, but it's in my na'au. I was amazed because I think it's in the na'au because I felt that I was seeing something so rare on screen. It was like, finally, someone has dared, you know, to break the glass ceiling and say, I'm going to tell the story this way. We are going to tell the story this way, and to be so good at it. That's it. You know, if we want to break away from the Hollywood model, we have to do it with such finesse, right? And such competence that people can look at it and just say, wow, I can't believe that they did that, and they succeeded. And that is what you have done. The other thing, Erin, that you mentioned there, I struggle with the same thing too. I feel so guilty for talking about the 3-act structure to my students. You know,
Yeah.
it's just like it is so hard to decolonize our minds to move away from that. And I think part of the problem is because all our textbooks, the textbook I use, you know, Robert McKee or John Truby, I mean,
Yeah.
all about the 3-act structure and Western linear ways of telling stories. And we don't have the textbooks. Somebody needs to write the text for indigenous storytelling in cinema.
Yeah.
Maybe Briar, you would like to take on that project. I wish somebody would. Then we wouldn't feel
I think
like
you can do it. Feels like you can do it.
I'd rather make films. Like Erin and Justyn, I'm sure.
Yeah. But Billy, you make a
Justyn,
good,
we'd love to hear from you.
yeah, Justin, if you have any comments, but maybe before that, but I want to just comment on Billy, you comment on finesse, and I think there's nuance, especially, and there's honestly taste too, and competence, right? And like, I think for a, another kind of creative or filmmaker with, lesser kind of faculties, it would kind of be pandering, or you're preaching, and I think it's like, and then you talk about, I mean, in our Q&A, we talked about the film exudes kindness and there's respect, right? But it's not pandering. So, I mean, how do you straddle the fence, Briar, between, going extreme left, extreme right when it comes to making it an authentic thing without it being inauthentic in a way? Because there are other kind of like stories out there that I mean, that can be kind of inauthentic in its kind of too much of a respect of kind of traditions or cultures and whatnot.
Look, I'm not sure it's even something that I find hard to talk about, but I just try and, to be, you just approach everything in a very real way. You're not trying to make it melodramatic, or you just approach it the way we approach life, I guess. They talked about the tomo, which is the betrothal ceremony. And when we shot that scene, I really involved the local community. Well, we really involved the community that were in the scene to talk about how that might play out. And so what you see there is really a scene that was inspired by their whakaaro, by their thoughts, and all the dialogue that those women speak. We sat down and they talked about what they might say. And so I think because of that, it was a very present scene. Like, we actually didn't know what might happen. You get this feeling of it being authentic. It's not overly blown or anything like that. They were everyone was very much in the moment.
That's very good. That's a very good comment. And like, from our Q&A and, from the actors, like, especially the younger ones like Hari and Tio, and like, they were like, how, I asked them, like, the standard, like, how did you kind of inform your character and stuff? And they, they were like saying like, they channeled or they just looked at their kind of like family and their aunties, their ancestors and whatnot. And like, what would they do, And then I think that brings that authenticity to it as well, because in a way, the fact that, you there's these arranged marriages, there's like, and like all these, kind of like, situations that I think, if I was thinking like, again, there's gonna be a domestic abuse thing that's gonna happen. It's gonna be, it's like, it's gonna, the shit's gonna hit the fan, so to speak. Like, it's like, but and in a way, and it didn't, and then it was so revolutionary because in a way, because this is what I expect in my, what I'm saying? It's like, like it's like, yeah. But I mean, Justyn, do you want to comment on anything or?
No, yeah, I mean, first off, just mahalo nui and congratulations, Briar. It's such an epic and touching film, and definitely agree with everything that Erin and Billy shared. And I think, for me, touching on what Anderson just brought up, it really was that the way that you were able to maintain the sense of the character at each age was so impressive to me. Like even though there are heavy moments, I couldn't help but laugh at, like, you know, the way the little kids interacted, like little Missy, like being the boss, and when Mata comes home for the first time and all of that, it totally reminded me of like my own niece and how she would be, you know, and just those relationships that develop, and you see that over time, it, you know, their natural ability to evolve their relationship as cousins, the way that you portrayed it, and I think is a testament also to the structure, really comes and kind of hits you on a heart level. And for me, I also really resonated with the presence of their grandmother, kind of feeling her presence throughout as like the thread throughout the whole piece. And in thinking about this kind of spiraling structure or kind of out of the box structure, I feel like her presence and her voice was very much present and like tied the three cousins together, no matter how they sort of separated or came back. And I feel like you use the tools of cinema so beautifully with production design and wardrobe, and you know, the just, I guess, keeping the camera really close and intimate, like on a lot of close-up details of really keeping us in the mind space of the characters, you know, gave that feeling of spirit. And I guess I was kind of curious in discussing, you know, just how long it sort of took to adapt the book into a screenplay, and how much time and care and thoughtfulness you put into what you kept and how you structured the story. I guess I'm kind of curious, how much did it change through the editing process? Because I feel like films are also rewritten again, you know, when you shoot it and then when you edit it. And so watching it, for me, I was just so blown away by how seamless it seemed to transition between the three time periods and between the three characters, and evolve so effortlessly that, you know, I'm curious how much of that was written that way and how much of that kind of maybe changed in post-production, in the editing process.
So there was the script that was written, and then the script that that we saw on screen that evolved in the editing process. What happened in the editing process was it was a really intense process. We did a lot of exploration, and quite often we would come back to the script. So as a foundational document, the script was pretty solid.
Nice.
So while it's changed, it hasn't changed as much as I thought it would from the script. There's a whole story strand that we took out, and that was really hard. So there's a whole location and a story strand with different characters that we actually had. And what we found during the screenings is that that strand confused, it was one too many. So what happened was, just because of that story strand, people didn't get that, but they didn't get a whole, they didn't know who was who, like all the way through. It really messed with them. So that was quite a big decision to get rid of that, because it was a valid part of the film, but it was the confusing part. And lucky we were able to take it away quite neatly. It didn't have big ramifications on the rest of the story.
Yeah, it was very intricately done, all put together.
Yeah, I'm glad Justyn mentioned the grandmother, whose voice just in the beginning and at the end. But when Mata meets the grandmother for the first time, and the way they do the hongi, you know, and you know, nose to nose, and I love the way the camera lingered there. It's like I've never seen it linger so long, you know. Usually it's like, you know, they're doing the wrong thing, hitting foreheads, you know. But the way she did it, and coming back to the word that Erin used, the love, the aroha, you can just feel it in that lingering of the hongi, that you know, that nose to nose, taking in a breath. And there's so many wonderful moments like that, which are so pregnant with meaning, you know, where some people might say, oh my God, you know, get on with it. It's so slow, right? But for me, it's like, yeah, linger in that space a little longer. Because for me, indigenous filmmaking is very much like that. People linger in the environment longer. They're not just passing through on their way somewhere and don't notice anything. You know, we kind of linger in the space because of the birds and the, you know, the sunlight and, you know, the trees and the plants and the earth, you know, and that to me is one aspect of indigenous cinema that I would love to see more of, you know, like feet, you know, massaging the land and like the land massaging back, you know, and even the you know, that protest, the land march protest, and then having Mata there, I couldn't help but think of, you know, the 1893 reenactment here in Hawaii and Kanalu Young, you know, in his wheelchair with Honani K. Trust. It's almost like captured so eloquently, right? The trauma that indigenous people have to face. You know, it's rendered us speechless. So how do you find your speech again? And so those moments, to me, the film, as Justyn put it, so littered with them, right? And I tell you, it's a masterpiece, if I may use that word. It really is. And for someone like myself, who teach a course on indigenous aesthetics in world cinema, I thank you, because I can go back to this gold mine again and again and again and say to my students, look at that, right? Wow. So
I mean, yeah, I mean, Erin, before you, I mean, you asked the question. I mean, but it's also like, you know, just, I mean, just the you know, the film language itself is very different, obviously, from a book or literature, and like, and you know, the you know, the classic, I mean, you know, like a tenet of like show not tell, basically, you know, and like, I mean, the scene where, you know, you have on the TV kind of the protests, and like it sets the, you know, the you know, it's a timestamp, and you know, the, you know, Mata, you know, older Mata, who's completely divorced and disconnected from her culture, not, and like, you know, just, and then just like, you know, when she's pressing her, oh, you know, the young adult Mata, when she's pressing her nose to grandmother and stuff like that, and just lingers on there, and it's just like, you know, that's like, you just see, you know, you as a viewer, you get that, you know, and I think it's like, and I think that's just beautiful in itself, that, you know, these images speak 1,000 words, and they, you know, they, in a way, are much more impactful than, you know, description, or like in you know, like in a book, you know. So you know, I commend you, and that's a testament to kind of like, again, the challenges of adapting you know, like original text into filmic language. And then I think it's like, in a way, you know, like indigenous kind of storytelling is much more apt for cinema, you know, and stretching the, you know, like the kind of like, and again, yeah, I think you know, the 3-act structure is very much confined in this box. And, you know, I think cinema, there's so much possibilities with cinema. That's why we love in film festivals. That's why film festivals exist. That's why we showcase cinema from around the world, because there's different ways to tell stories, you know, cinematic stories. So, but Erin, go ahead. You have a question.
Yeah. So this came to mind because I think Justyn in the Kanaka Maoli community does his best. And I think with great love, as is present in the film, as I mentioned, means also great vulnerability from you and you're in the creatives. And that's not easy. And so like there's two things that come to mind what I think when I watch the film is the level of vulnerability that must have been asked of you, and also the space you have given for the spiritual. Like I hear you in that some of this doesn't feel like it was just like A equals B on a whiteboard. Like this feels like soul work. And I'm curious, you know, what was your process for yourself in navigating this journey? Because in vulnerability and spiritual work in yourself to take on this task and journey, I'm wondering if you had rituals for yourself and, you know, protecting yourself, taking care of yourself, and giving yourself the permission to respond to what the world is giving you to, like in the creation of this, if you know, whether it was prayer, whether it was through protocol. I'm just really curious about that level of the process for you.
Yeah, so a lot for me is about giving myself space. You know, we talk about the bush and the stream and the forest. I'm one of those people that will just go and stand there and just be. And that's kind of my karakia. That's my prayer to myself, and to take that stuff away and allow myself, I guess, to give myself armor, but to be open. And on set, of course, we operated in a very Maori way, where we had another producer, Libby Hakaraya, of course, who you all know. She was on. So we were all looked after spiritually, and at the end of the day, we were all singing our waiata. So we had all of that operating as well. But I think you talked about there's a level where you're not following your plan. And I think as Indigenous filmmakers, like, we all go in with a plan and what we think we do, but very much with this film, and particularly with me, I'm someone that goes, oh, this is what we were going to do, but I feel like we could do, you get into space and you get with the spirit of the people in the room, and what you intended might not be the right thing. And it's something you have to trust. I really believe that. And you have to go with it, and to not hold yourself back from following the spirit. So I was a bit that way inclined with the way I worked. And I think it's something that we all need to, listen to this.
Yeah.
And it's the same when writing. Listen to this, stop following it doesn't have to go A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It can, what do you feel? And try it that way. And I operate very much, I think, like that. Yeah, and we've learnt to mistrust that through the way we've been colonized, to think, this is why you write a film, this is the way you make a film. We've learnt to mistrust that spirit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think Erin brought up one of the, I guess, the stumbling blocks to being led by intuition and feeling, and that is going to the set with your shooting schedule, how many scenes per day, the shot list, and just going through that and becoming unaware of what the environment at that moment is giving you, offering you, right? Because you're so busy with your shot list. So how do we, especially younger filmmakers that we are training at ACM, and kind of forcing them to have everything mapped out beforehand, and then they go there and that's all the focus is. So it's so hard to be led by the moment, by the spirit. I did an interview with Myrna Kamai, who produced Eddie Kamai's movies. And one of the things she said was, as a Haole producer, she was so frustrated because they'd go to the set and Eddie Kamai would be doing what she called holo holo, like shoot the breeze, And she said, oh my God, we got all this money, you're going to just do something else, I've come with this prepared, and she called it holo holo style, And my students loved it, like, okay, hold. I said, but not for this class. You cannot hold. Because I think the schooling system wants us to be structured in Western way, and there is value to that. Maybe Justyn, I'd love you to talk a little bit more about that as a young filmmaker who's doing great work. Do you struggle with that as well, between feelings and following your shot list and stuff?
Of course, and because time's of the essence, there's always the first AD counting down. But you choose your moments. And I also was working with the wonderful Ainsley Gardner, and we had each other's backs. So she would look at me and say, go for it. And we would kind of cover for each other. Right. And our director of photography was really open to that. Like, I remember there's one scene in there that was completely, that we kept in the film, that was completely not written or anything, that just came about through standing in the bush and looking and thinking about the possibility of a scene. And it's just really, that scene is where there are three young girls. It's quite otherly kind of scene. They're sitting in the trees, and older Mata is going past in the car, and she looks.
Mm-hmm.
I love that scene.
Yeah. So that was a spur of the moment. That was one of those things we're talking about.
Mm.
And
That makes me love it more.
and the DOP, he said to me, I said to him, you're just going to have to just run. You know, it's really, I just remember that because he was like, oh my God, you need a big heavy camera, and I'm making him run through the bush to capture that. But he was 100% committed. So, and you know, moments like that are kind of magic. And if you're able to loosen the constraints and you have the right team around you, you should definitely grab them.
I mean, the fact that you had, like, you were tag teaming with Ainsley Gardner, your co-director. I mean, and you as the screenwriter, was it, how did you navigate and negotiate, you know, kind of your, I mean, you're two distinct individuals, obviously, and like, you know, how, and then it was just like simpatical. You guys were you like twins in a way, and you had your own twin language in a way that was there any challenges? Yeah.
Oh, there was definitely the odd challenge, but we collaborated so much even through the writing process. So she was before she was going to be the co-director, she's a very strong creative producer. So we already were used to collaborating, and we had made the film Waru.
Yes, exactly.
And that was very, so we kind of knew how to work together, and with the differences of opinion we had over the film, most of them we resolved before the shoot because we didn't want to bring that onto set. But we very much shared a strong vision, and we tried our very best to leave ego out of the room. We had a common vision, and that was our thing. No ego, leave that behind. It's all about the film. So we did have a language on set where I would just tap her shoulder, or she would tap my shoulder and go, that's not working, maybe try. So we had quite a fluid, we were quite a tag team. We had scenes, of course, the scenes that we connected to the most, we would be the lead director on, and then the other person would be the support person.
Right. I mean, just going back to what Villy had asked Justyn, I mean, just changing gears really quick on your own work. I mean, because you're a graduate of USC, actually, right? You're a USC grad, film school grad, and then I mean, again, that's like, kind of like the, film church, Hollywood and what have you. Like, it's like, I mean, how do you navigate, when it comes to the logistics of the shot list and making your day and all that stuff? And like, maybe, I mean, because you were adapting in a different way, the poetry of Wayne Westlake, right? Of like, and you're using that kind of as the seed for your film Down the Sidewalk in Waikiki. Can you just talk about kind of that kind of development process and creative process of adapting those poems?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think for me, it kind of started with, I mean, in adapting Down on the Sidewalk from a collection of 26 poems that had been written by, a Hawaiian artist that had passed away, several decades ago, and whose work had been revived only recently, through the help of Richard Hamasaki and Meili Sai. It was, for me, kind of, the poetry kind of started as a foundation, as I'm sure, I guess I mean that in terms of like looking for sort of the spiritual essence of the connections between each of these very different poems, and I guess trying to draw characters from them, and create a storyline and a scenario that sort of got at the heart of who these janitor characters were, this janitor character was, and who this houseless kind of kahuna character was. And I think for me, because it was poetry and not necessarily maybe something that was more linear, like a fiction novel or something, it in a way, from the beginning, in my mind, freed me to not necessarily be held to any kind of structure, and to be able to be a little bit more abstract with it, and to be able to kind of use the language of cinema to tell the story and to portray the characters. And so I think much in the same way, like Briar, you had mentioned the marble that really stuck with you. There are just very like small key images in these poems that weren't very big, or maybe didn't go through all of the poems, but were just small things that became anchors in actually telling the story. And I think for me, I come from a background of shooting and editing as well, and especially editing. I cut down on the sidewalk, and so that in terms of like filming and being there on the day of production and having the basis of your shot list and things like that, I guess I was fortunate in being able to direct from that editing perspective, like thinking of how things are going to cut together. And when you start to run, low on time, you start to be able to kind of see, okay, now we can just cut this. We don't need to shoot this part, or it allows you to be open to like, okay, this actor is sort of feeling this way, or is giving this, and maybe that's a good thing. Let's just run with it. And so I guess being able to see the edit in your head as you're shooting it is sort of what frees me personally to be able to be open to whatever signs are presenting themselves in the environment in the moment, or being constrained to logistical or production constraints, and then having to adapt on the fly. And I think for me it was sort of coming from that basis of looking at it from the editing standpoint, and then also like Erin had brought up with the sort of protocol or things that grounded me in telling the story was from early on in pre-production, like sort of going into Waikiki and just sitting there and communicating with the kupuna of that space and asking for their guidance in it, asking for Westlake's guidance in it, and then trusting, just when the time came to shoot, just kind of trusting that whatever was happening because it was supposed to, even if it wasn't a part of the blueprint or a part of the original plan. And I feel like that's usually where the serendipitous things that become magic in the end come from.
Absolutely.
Go
ahead, Billy. I think if you want to go ahead.
I just want to say that Erin and Justyn, you're doing such amazing work yourselves, in terms of finding your own voice in your own films. And for both of you, you're able to capture something, almost, I'd say maybe spiritual, right? Which is more of a feeling and an authenticity of feeling in what you see, and the recognition, oh, that's an authentic moment on screen. Maybe just the way the characters, interacted, or maybe a symbol or a motif. And so I just wanted to take this opportunity to commend you too, because I don't think I've ever expressed it publicly, but please know that I'm a fan of both your work. But I wanted to pick up on the symbol motif idea, if I may, because one of the things that fascinates me is the Tanifa motif, because it seems to keep reoccurring in Maori, cinema. Yeah, you see it, for example, in Once Were Warriors, when Grace, the protagonist, is writing in her journal. She's writing about the Tanifa. And then here, I think one of the last lines, if not the very last line, is when Mata says, as a young girl, in the water, in the river, I've seen the Tanifa. And I was watching closely at what is the Tanifa, and I saw this the green, the red, the blue, and the holding hands. And almost as though to say, you have taken the Tanifa and made us see it as that not so much a destroyer of culture, but an upholder, a protector, like an omakua of culture. And that, to me, that moment when I saw that, I said, wow, she's weaponized the Tanifa in a way that is so subtle, but those who have eyes to see, it's a wow moment.
Yeah.
But anyway, if you are able to talk a little bit about the way you use symbols or motifs like that, is there anything that kind of has a pattern or a thread that runs through it? Or maybe just comment about your thoughts on the Tanifa.
Well, it's exactly what you said. In my view, the Tanifa was about her culture. Yeah, it's a stronghold, and it represents something positive. So that was it's the kind of ultimate thing. So that's exactly it. But we talked a lot about what does the Tanifa look like, because you get all these representations in film and in books of what a Tanifa looks like, and it's painted to look like a dragon, but for us it's not necessarily a dragon. You know, Tanifa is more of a feeling or a spirit, and sometimes it can be a log that's floating upstream and going in the wrong direction. So to put a face on the Tanifa seemed wrong.
Right.
So that was why in the end we settled on the colors and the ribbons and the kind of
the opening and the closing images are just phenomenal in the way you've used them. Thank you.
I mean, I think we're running out of time, but I think Briar, I think I do want to just ask your question. Like, you've been working in the industry for a very long time. You worked in TV. You've written other scripts like The Strength of Water, again, Fresh Meat, which is a great film. Like, I really enjoyed. But like, it's like, as your body, I mean, do you feel that your body of work, I mean, they're all kind of very much, you worked in different genres. You worked in kind of fantasy, family, maybe even like sitcoms, I think. Like, it's like, how's your body of work in all these different genres informed you in basically in your creative process with this film, with Cousins?
I guess like the one thing they've all got in common, and what I really love to explore, and I think even at the moment I'm writing a comedy with Victor Roger, who's a Samoan playwright, and it's a comedy for, I don't know, it's a 8-part series, but even with that, with Cousins, and with all of these things, I really love working with relationships and the dynamic between people. And I think that's what they all, regardless of whether it's been funny or serious or mystical, it's kind of my jam, I think, and that's what I love to do. I'm just trying to work myself out. That's part of the reason we write, is to work ourselves out and where we fit in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a great way to end it.
Could I just probe a bit further on that? Because with the Hollywood model, it's conflict driven. All right, how do you intensify the conflict in the rising action to get it there? But the whole notion of relationships that you are exploring, which I think is what Indigenous filmmakers are trying to do. It's almost like our relationships have been broken asunder through colonization, whatever, and we need to bring it back. Would you talk a little bit more about relationships and why that to you is kind of a key aspect of your work?
Yeah, that thing about conflict, I really don't like it. I really don't like that. We're taught that every film has to have this antagonist, and he's the person that or she is the person that drives the story, because the protagonist is reacting and forced to these. I like the idea in my head that we're constantly working through, that we engage and we do a dance and we work through things, rather than this kind of reactive examples that we've been set. So that's, if that makes any sense. So, and I really like we really do have to rethink, because I also teach film. I have a short film group, and even for me, even though I'm working in this area and we're all trying to work in this area of redefining, you know, what structure is for Indigenous people, I do find my head, because it's easy for me, going back to that Western way of teaching. So this is a challenge for all of us, right?
Yes.
We have this information and we kind of know it, but how do we teach it? How do we impart this knowledge in a way that is clear and can be understood?
Yeah.
More about it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's what's great. The power of film and the power of cinema. It's so, you know, it's so malleable. You know, so I mean, at the very least, it's, you know, it's a good foundation to have. But like to think outside the box, that's what, you know, so to speak. And again, decolonize your mind to, you know, go for, instead of the 3-act structure, the spiral structure that
Yeah.
described and stuff like that. I love that. I love that description. But yeah, I think, you know, we ran out of time, and I think, you know, again, thank you so much, Briar, for you know, really seeing this through and, like, you know, realizing this film. It's truly beautiful, and we were all very touched by it, and I think it's true inspiration for not only for you know, a lot of creatives, especially Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander or what have you. Like, it's like, you know, just our Indigenous people in general. I think it's a truly an inspiration. And you know, I think for my kind of takeaways from this conversation, I should read more Patricia Grace. I definitely will read Potiki. And Vili, you need to write that textbook. And
Erin and Justyn.
yeah, Justyn and Erin, keep doing what you do. And I mean, Leanne, do you have any final words about, you know, maybe you know, send us off and maybe talk about what, you know, what's happening at PIC. This is the 30th anniversary of PIC, right? So if you want to comment on that.
Well, first off, I just want to say this has been such an amazing panel, and I don't want it to end. I want to just sit here and listen to everything. So thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for bringing your knowledge, your wisdom, and for sharing it openly. And I want to thank HIF for celebrating PIC's 30th anniversary with us this year. And so we're very excited, and just come to our website, piccomm.org, to see what we have planned throughout the year. We're going to have a lot of fun things happening just to celebrate the 30th. But thank you all. Thank you again.
Yeah, on that note, you know, thank you again for participating. And also, and please, everyone, enjoy the rest of the Indigenous Lens. This is just one of the mini festivals that we have 4 in all through this spring and summer season. And leading up to our 41st edition of the Hawaii International Film Festival, the big show in November. You know, as kind of like this lockdown and pandemic hopefully sunsets and we can go back to the theater and whatnot, and, you know, see each other in real life. And Briar, you know, we'd love to, you know, have you in Hawaii in the very near future, you know, and you know, just talk story, break bread, you name it, just have fun, and just, you know, just really kind of celebrate all of our work, so your work. And thank you again, and mahalo, and we'll see you at the movies. Thank you so much.